Yes.
All right.
Okay, fantastic.
Excellent.
All right, we're going to kick off with the ad hoc committee. This is growth and development opportunity to talk about this priority goal area of the strategic plan, the draft. At this, I wanted to talk a little bit before we kick off about goals, the objectives of this particular meeting, so that we have that clarity. I'm going to be super to the point because I know there are a few things that council members have said they wanted to be clear on as we start with this small group format. And so this afternoon, our purpose is to not expand the plan, but to streamline it, to get clarity on your intent as it relates to growth and development, this aspect of the plan. To use that clarity of intent, we're calling it sort of your elevator speech, to hone in on what we should focus on for objectives, action items, and as they trickle down, therefore, performance metrics. So again, not expansion, but focus, clarity, streamlining. And then our intent is, as we move through that conversation, at the end of the session and as we wrap up each of these work groups and come back to the full council for a work session in February, that all of you as the members of the ad hoc group on growth and development are able to represent the conversation we're going to have this afternoon, be able to speak, I hope, with some consensus and clarity on direction, and make the recommendations to your colleagues about this is what we think the growth and development element of the strategic plan should look like and why, and really help lead the presentation of where we end this conversation, and seek that buy-in from their council members. And we're going to collate all those conversations, stitch it up into a draft strategic plan, and then our next phase is really to go and circulate that in the community, get input from the community, and then utilize that feedback to refine your final strategic plan that you will consider for adoption. Anything else you wanted to add?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yep, so we do have Brian and Dan from BDS here to help facilitate the conversation, and then also Jean and Trish, who were on the staff work group working on growth and development, here, give a presentation later on in the agenda.
Right, fantastic.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So, I mean, I think one of the things, I don't know if you call that out explicitly, but, you know, we said we could streamline objectives too, right, at
Yes,
that level, if we
absolutely.
felt that in any of the subgroups that would be appropriate. And also, I don't know if you mentioned, but the role of metrics and trying to see if we can come up with, you know, taken as a whole, set aside the number of objectives. If we can get to, are you going to look to see if we can get to just 2 or 3 metrics at the top level that reflect the goal?
Yeah, our goal is to find the minimum number that we think is going to be a suitable indicator of whether or not our progress as we move through this 5-year plan has been good. It's not, again, we're not developing a whole performance measurement program for the city. We're not trying to identify everything that we could measure, even as it relates to growth and development. And what we list in the plan won't be everything that we measure as we think about growth and development.
Right. I think the idea is that the administration, for action items, you're going to do project management, and you're going to have things that you measure as part of the block and tackling of project management. So it's not to come up with 3 metrics per, you know, times 8 action items. It's
Correct.
really to say, do we have a dashboard that reflects this goal?
Yes. That was a great way to put it.
So I don't want to take anybody away from their agenda,
Yeah.
but that performance measures right below the goal confused me.
Okay.
Because my notes really were that it seemed like we should have measurable standards for how whether we're completing the action items. steps. So that's where I was confused.
Yeah,
But,
so
okay.
let us
Okay.
put that as a topic to consider as we get to performance metrics. I think it's a good one. I think it kind of ties back into what Tola and I were just saying too,
Okay.
and the level of understanding about what needs to live in the plan and what might be able to live elsewhere as part of project management, say. Okay, and that's another word that I was going to make, I guess, is even at staff we're having a lot of conversation about, what is appropriate to be in a strategic plan, what can live on a work plan, what are we already doing or have committed to do, and so we'll probably bring that up every once in a while here too, is we don't have to list everything that we intend to do over the next 5 years in this plan. Okay. All right. Brian, you want to?
Sure.
Brian's going to facilitate our agenda.
Brian Scott, BDS Planning. Dan Lokic is here with me. Gabriel's facilitating a meeting in Tacoma. He would rather be here, but we can't be everywhere at once, so he sends his regrets. Our agenda, the main assignment that I got from the staff was, we can't come out at the end of these meetings with more stuff. We have to come out with equal or less stuff, so we can't expand the plan further. So I'm going to try and stick to that. The goal is clarity and streamlining on where we are. Agenda will be just done with the sort of intended outcomes here in a moment. We want to spend the first chunk of time in a conversation among the counselors about what your intent is about this goal. Because as conversations have evolved in recent weeks or months, we've realized that as the staff was trying to flesh out objectives and actions, there was maybe not clarity on exactly what the council meant by the goal. So we thought having some conversation about that was worth doing to start it. And then the biggest chunk of the agenda will be about the prioritizing the objectives and understanding the actions as the staff propose them. The way we plan to do that is have the staff explain what they were thinking about the objectives and the actions, and then give you a chance to react to that. And the product of that section will be a prioritized list of objectives, which might be less objectives, might be the same objectives with some rewording, but certainly it'll be ordering them in terms of their order of importance. And then if we have time, would love it if we got into specifically what are we doing about the performance measurements, and it's my hope that we will. But I want to make sure we have clarity on what we're doing before we get to the measures. Does that make sense for what we're about to do? And then how do I switch this to the other? I said I would try it, but I guess I didn't get my license. Let me be at the beginning. There we go. So the goals of the meeting is talk about what is strategic planning and guidelines for it, to clarify the council's intent behind the goals, as I just said, kind of that about the elevator speech to a community member, emphasizing objectives based on the intent and criteria, learning more about the actions, and refining the performance measures. So what is strategic planning? We've talked about this a little bit before. I'll just take a couple minutes to kind of walk through that. I think strategic planning, effectively, it's a deliberate and disciplined effort to create some fundamental decisions and actions that are going to shape where the organization, what it does and how it does it. And I think it's useful to do periodically, not constantly, to think kind of longer term about what's the organization all about and what's it trying to accomplish. So kind of up out of the day-to-day weeds of what you're doing every day because you're city government, and thinking a little long-term about what's it all about. And it's a process by which the organization envisions the future and develops goals and objectives and actions to achieve that future. We're well on our way in that process. One of the things that it can get mixed up with is a work plan, And your work plan is sort of everything the city's got to do its job. And some of those things are kind of pretty much the same day to day, or they're going pretty well, and you don't need to make a change. And often those things are pretty quiet in a strategic plan, almost not mentioned, because really the strategic is where do we strategically need to change our course, either do less of something, do more of something, do something different. So the strategic plan is about thinking strategically about what your strategy is to change course in one way or another. Why do it? Clarify goals and direction, address significant problems or take advantage of opportunities, set priorities that will inform decision making, especially budgeting as you go forward, increase accountability and improve performance. Again, I think you're kind of on your way to those things. We've been talking about all of those things. What strategic planning is not, is you can't predict the future. Something could happen tomorrow that we don't know about today. It's not a substitute for the judgment of leadership going forward. Just because you have the plan today doesn't mean you're not going to have some problem in the future that you're going to have to make a judgment about. It's not always smooth, predictable, or linear. It is never smooth, predictable, linear in my experience if you're actually doing it. And it's not a comprehensive sort of management plan. As I said, this kind of the annual work plan is a more detailed thing about what everybody's going to do. And the strategic plan is not that. It's more at a higher level about how are you going to shift direction in key areas. Does that make sense?
It does.
This is what we all said, or the council and staff leadership group said last spring when the very first meeting with the consultant team, when we said we had the department heads and the council leadership, and we said, so what are you trying to accomplish? And the list that they created was vision and strategy alignment, that the council and the staff are more clearly aligned in a disciplined way, and that there was good coordination between departments, that we were engaging diverse community voices and had community-driven priorities, and we had an actionable plan with priorities that were realistic about capacity, assignability, that it would drive the budget and capital improvement decisions, it had metrics and monitoring, and was a good communication tool. And my sense is, we're getting there, and we've done this really pretty well, and what we're kind of down here is trying to make sure that we've got this stuff aligned in response to that. It's my sense is where we are on trying to achieve those goals.
What does assignability mean?
I think that, and anybody else that was there is welcome to jump in. I think that was about, it's clear who's doing what and who's driving in different things. That this is assigned to staff, this is assigned to that department, but it's sort of clarity on who's driving.
And that there's someone to do it.
Yeah.
Good point.
A resource.
By my own observation, as somebody that is outside the community, when we said this in the spring of 2018, Issaquah was amidst a fair amount of leadership transition, and there was some confusion about who was driving. So that as partly clarity was one of the things that was clearly sought after at that time. So the first section that we wanted to talk about a little bit was about council intent. This is the ad hoc committee on growth and development. We're going to do one of these for each goal, 3 of them today. And what we want to try and clarify is what are we trying to achieve under growth and development? Is this the goals? So the growth and development, the goal is, as you agreed to at a council meeting, growth is proactively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. Does everybody have this? Just so I'm gonna, because I don't have it on a slide, I don't think. Growth is proactively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. And we spent some time on this in some council meetings trying to get clear on that, and we identified a 3 objectives underneath that. I don't want to go there yet. Mostly what I would say is, what is it we're trying to say? What is the intent behind this goal about growth and development? And I guess asking each of the council members sort of, so how are you going to explain this to your neighbor in the grocery store when they say, you know, I saw that strategic plan thing in the newspaper and I saw that growth and development thing and I don't get it. What are you gonna? And I just this I think helped the staff understand what you all are thinking. So I want to give you an opportunity to say your elevator speech to each other. I'll try and take some notes and see if we're all on the same page. If that makes sense.
Can I go? I'll go.
I just
You know, what is it? Growth is a reality. It has been happening. It's going to continue to happen all around us within the city as well. We want to make sure we get the outcomes that this community desires and deserves. So, in other words, what effect does the growth have? When I say outcomes, there's densities we want in some places and not in other areas, right? There's areas that we want of the city to have a certain character and perform a certain function and provide certain range of services, and not other areas. So we want as growth continues, both certainly in population, hopefully more in jobs, that it happens along the lines and achieves the outcomes that we desire for our community.
guide the impacts or guide the outcomes. Okay.
And I like the fact, one thing I didn't address in there as part of this goal is that communicated part. Because this in particular is a topic that is difficult to see the forest from the trees sometimes. And it's ongoing duty and obligation, those of us who are working this, to bring as many of our constituents along in two-way communication, but with a real emphasis on making sure it's understood how we see things and what we're doing about it. So that's the communication element, and I think I'm glad that that's in there as well.
So communicate. You want to be able to also communicate the vision for growth.
Well, and one of the second word in here is planned. It says managed and planned, and what management are we doing? What are the plans? And making sure that people understand those.
You go next.
Do you want to?
I don't care.
Second or third? So I've struggled a little bit with the elevator speech homework because my elevator speech, I think, to the community members that I happen to meet, well, my first question would be, which newspaper did you read this in? Because we don't have a newspaper. But I would be super excited if one popped up. But anyway, when somebody asks me what we're doing and what, the strategic plan, I think my answer, I will always want my answer to be that we are focusing on what you told us to work on. And those items would be, 1, 2, 3 or ABC, depending on what topic, what category we're talking about. For growth and development, I'm struggling a little bit because I've gone over all the materials a couple of times and read the community analysis, and I'm not sure that we've captured what the community has asked us to capture. What I read in the analysis was, and I'll keep this short just so that you understand where I'm a little bit not set on what my elevator speech would be about this one, is that really the community asked us, and staff said that their concerns were about controlling growth. And I think I'm not understanding I don't know what the comments were behind. What do they mean by controlling growth? There's got to be some more information behind there. But from there, the growth and development goal evolved to proactively manage, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. I know there's retaining the small town identity, there's the controlling growth, I think there's the sense out there that we haven't done it. There's also the sense in a separate section that leadership doesn't, city and council doesn't respond very well to the pressures that we face from growth. So I'm not quite sure we have this whole topic right. And just kind of as a preview, I guess we'll go to later, I would shorten the goal to growth is managed in a way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. I didn't find anything in the analysis that asked us to communicate them. We don't understand your plans. Please educate us. I don't think I found that anywhere. And I don't know that the word proactive needs or plan needs to be in there. I think we just need to manage it better, and that's what the community asked us to do. So I think my elevator speech would eventually be about what we land on, and I'm not sure we're there yet. But so I know we're going to talk more about other things later, but that's kind of where I am overall in the goal.
So mine would be, we continue, so Issaquah was growing fast, and then the area experienced explosive growth on top of the explosive growth that Issaquah had in particular. So we've had a double whammy of growth and continue to operate in that kind of environment. And so it's how do we as a city respond, particularly given that we live in, I would argue, the second most managed growth metro in the U.S. behind Portland. And so we live in an environment that's heavily constrained by our county and our region. And so what can we do to make sure that our city gets through this growth in a way that the community feels is, what's the best outcome given the growth pressures that the whole area continues to experience? And so to me, there's three pieces to that. When I think of communication, I actually think of the input as well as what we're putting out, right? So Stacey, I would agree with you that I'm not sure that we have our finger exactly on when we say controlling growth and that the community's not sure we're controlling growth well. I'm not sure we know exactly what that means. I think we all know that traffic is the obvious example, right? But beyond that, I think that part of this process is, I would tell somebody in the elevator that as part of the strategic plan, what we're going to do is we're going to first off make sure we understand both at the neighborhood level and at the city level, that what people's concerns are with growth, right? What are the critical elements for us as a city, right? 20 years ago, we had an aerodrome. We don't have an aerodrome anymore. What are the elements that we have today that people consider essential to us as a city? I think we know that open space is one of them, but we had city treasures 15 years ago. Some of them are still around. Some of them aren't. What's critical? Is Pickering is the barn essential? Is what's the one? Gilman Village, right? Is Gilman Village essential? I think we've talked as a council. We think that it is. I don't know if that's grounded in the community, right? So the first of the three pieces is understanding that. The second is what is the block and tackling of, what are the guts of the engine of how we do this response, right? It's around projecting, it's around looking at the limits that are circumscribed on us by the county and by the region, and the second is building that core engine of how we do our modeling going forward. We did a certain kind of modeling for the Central Issaquah Plan. Is that still valid? Do we want to expand that citywide? What worked from that? What didn't work from that? So that's the guts of the engine, right? And then the output is what do we accomplish, right? If we've heard from the community and we've built this engine that will hopefully allow us to develop rules and policies and investments as a city, what are we getting out the far side to reflect back on what the community's asked us about? So that's sort of the three elements. In my speech as somebody, I would say we've got this challenging environment. It continues to be incredibly challenging. We're circumscribed in a lot of ways. A is making sure we understand what the highest priorities are to maintain and augment as a city. B is understanding the equations, if you will, that will govern the kinds of policies that we will implement over the next 5 years. And C is talking about what those outputs, and we're not going to have those this week or this month, but what those are going to be, how we're going to know in 5 years that we've accomplished what the community wanted us to accomplish.
So what I heard was we want people to know that the growth is real and it's happening now. Heard elements of that from all three of you. We want to guide impacts and outcomes. We want clarity on what we're planning. We want citizens to know that we're doing what you told us to work on. We're a little confused about whether we're trying to control growth. I think there was from all three of you, there was a little bit of maybe this isn't exactly clear yet what it is we're trying to, what we're trying to get to. Mention of small town identity, mention of growth is fast. What are the key elements today? We're doing this in the context of strong regional growth management compared to a lot of other places, and told us 3 points there at the end: the priorities for preservation, criteria for making decisions, and then measures about whether we're getting there. So, are there disconnects there, or that's trying me to say back to you what you said?
I think the clarity on what we are, I don't know if who was talking when you wrote clarity on what we are planning.
I think you.
Was that me? Okay. Because Paul talked about clarity
well,
too.
Maybe it was Paul. Maybe it was Paul saying he wanted to communicate it well.
Okay, if it was me, and when I first looked at it, I thought it was me. I want to clarify a little bit that it's not clarity on what we are planning, because we have a zillion plans. It's clarity. I want clarity on what, for the community, on what we are doing to in our strategic plan to address the concerns that the community raised to us about controlling growth. So it's clarity on what we are doing in the strategic plan. And I mention that because I know you're going to take this back and you all are going to read it, and so I just want to make that clear.
I have a question. If I may, as part of the introduction, we did talk about Brian did mention that you can look at these goals and they may, when you said what a strategic plan is, one of the things it may do is be highlighting maybe something that we're not doing or something we need to do different. And I'm wondering what my colleagues, how you would answer that question when it comes to managing growth. What are we not doing, or what should we be doing different? What comes to mind? What's on our, maybe we've already got something on a work plan, maybe there's something we're not doing and wish we did, or something you've heard from the community and it's not on our radar yet.
Well,
where are we with that?
That's kind of the question I had. So, I read the analysis again today twice, and the community wants us to better control growth, better manage growth. I don't know what that means. Some things pop into my head. So we just got through with a big initiative regarding the Bergsman property, right? And we just worked on that. And out of that came, aspirations, values from our community about saving our hillsides. We've been talking for several years about whether we need to address zoning on our surrounding hillsides to further protect from sprawl creeping up the hillsides, because we're supposed to be focusing on the valley floor. So one concrete action step we could take, I don't know what you call them, objectives, is to consider revising, which is very concrete, consider revising policies to further protect the hillsides from growth. But
Okay, all right. All right, so that's
one
an
example of something concrete
that we're not currently doing.
Yeah.
Getting back to his point, what are we not doing today, or what different
Right.
should we do? Okay, that's a good example. And the reason I'm asking that question too is I at a certain level, I think that you could there could be lots of observations about things that, and a lot of opinions about what we should and shouldn't do. But when I go up at a certain level, if I think about just the city's comprehensive plan, I think about the detailed sub-area plans that we have. And now I'm using planning in kind of the classic city planning context. You said it. I think, Stacy, you meant the same. We have zoning and land use. We have these things kind of regulated. And we also have, in certain areas, real specific objectives of how we want to see things build out with character. We have these visions for these neighborhoods. I look at those. Those are really big building blocks. Those are really big, and they are going to continue to influence and shape work plans going forward for a long time. And I look at and so my question is, okay, but what are the holes? What's something that we haven't addressed yet? And so that's where I was
Sure.
thinking. And thank you for raising that point, the feedback from the community, well, they want it to be managed. And my answer would be, because to me, that's a very ambiguous comment, and those comments. And I read that, I go, well, and I've had many of these conversations. Well, let me tell you what we're already doing. And since you want it to be managed, well, here's some things we're doing to manage. And it invariably, there's very few times where it's like, I knew all of that, but we still need to manage things better. That's usually, I didn't know that. And so I kind of come around to, there's these big things. We have a lot of structure for a lot of planning. We've been incredibly productive since in the last 8 years in terms of what we've accomplished, and so I can't kind of see past those big blocks and think, what's I think before we had a central area plan, even before the urban villages, for example, I think maybe it would have been hard to see that we needed those things. I don't really know, and so maybe I just have a blind spot. But I am I see those. I think there is a lot of planning. I think there's a lot of control. We've tweaked it. We opened it up. We refined it. We tightened some things down. We got more specific. We learned from the urban villages. We did some stuff there to convert those into just to the code structure. And so for this one in particular, to me, it doesn't sound like, hey, you've got to do things a lot different. I'm not hearing that as the call from the community.
We don't have the call. We have a couple of words. We don't know what they actually said. We don't have that data with us. That's why I said I don't know what it is. But my experience with people and having that conversation is a little bit differently. Well, I don't really control the regional traffic that happens through Issaquah. Yeah, I don't really care about that. Why are you building on top of that traffic? So I don't disagree that we've done a lot, but according to the data, and we either trust the community input or we not. According to the community input, we need to do more, and we need to do something different in some ways. I don't know what that some ways is. Don't confuse my comments, please, with we haven't done anything. I'm parroting what the community said.
Yeah, and I didn't imply that
yeah.
at all. I'm telling you what is in my mind
Sure.
when I think about this topic.
Yeah.
So it's when I ask that question, what are we not doing or what can we do different? To me, there's these big blocks in the room, or those things that we have done.
Sure.
So what might be in there? And I also, and maybe I do respond a little bit different than you, Stacy, in that I have access in this form to the same data, but other information that I've gathered through people over the years, especially over, say, the last 3 years, is I feel that I'm called upon to bring that up myself. If I don't, so I'm not just looking for, well, let me see what they said so I know what to tell you. That's not the only call to action that I have.
Me too.
We have to make our own proposals.
Right, which is which is why I gave the example about the zoning on the hillsides, because I would wager a bet that that's probably not a specific ask in the community's feedback, but that's what I've heard several times over the year, and then we just heard that most recently. So so I agree with you. We get our information, our feedback in many different ways.
So do you, as I listen to this, do you want the goal to be that the city of Issaquah should play a more active role in managing growth and development, or do you want to continue what you're doing? I mean, that seems like a strategic, clearly, as there's a lot of growth and change that gets citizens hot and bothered anywhere, and you're going to hear about it as elected officials. That's just facts. Whether you're doing it well or not, those things would happen. So I guess my question is, in response to that input, do you think the city should be doing more to manage growth and development, or do you want to stay the course? It's kind of, that feels like a strategic.
It's kind of what I'm asking. And I realize as you said that, one thing that's missing from this whole packet that we have is context. Because if you're going to address the question, do we want to do more or do something different, it has to be based in the context of what we already have in the orders that we're marching to. So that context is kind of missing here. And that's what I was trying to bring. For my context, there's a heck of a lot already on the ground. And so that question is, do we have any evidence that this is insufficient, or this is wrong, or we're missing something? What do we need to be doing different? Do we want to should we redefine what the shining city on the hill looks like? And do we need to do with planning our growth strategy? Fine tune our course to get there.
I think that's what elections are for. I don't think you can get. I don't think you can get the planning scientists to tell you whether or not you should be doing something more. I mean, it gets down to a matter of opinion about whether or not things are going pretty well or things are screwed up. And that's what you all ran for office, and now you got to deal with the fact that you won.
I do hear that, though, as a theme between all three of you have made comments about perhaps wanting to do more, or as a possibility, doing more evaluation or assessment. You just spoke about, look at what the model might suggest is going to be the output. You've talked about posing the question of, is there more that we should be doing? Should we be doing different things? You've said you want perhaps more data from the public to better answer, what does that term of control growth or manage growth mean? And so there's an element of posing the questions and assessing that, evaluating. So maybe that's a focal point for an objective here, or for the goal. And I think our difficulty was not hearing consensus, right? Having this ambiguity, not having perfect information, having some input, but having to synthesize that in each our own way. And then the example that you gave is a policy direction sort of action, right? And so that wasn't necessarily a leap that staff was ready to say was desired by council. But if you have some consensus around actions that you want to at least consider or evaluate, then let's get specific in that way.
So let me add something to this. I think let me speak for a second about the Valley. So I think that we have a central Issaquah plan, and we had a moratorium where we refined things that were in there. I think lurking below the surface is that as a community, as a city, I don't believe we have consensus that what's in there is what we want. I will tell you, as a very pragmatic politician, I look at my friends that are in other cities like Shoreline, and I use Shoreline as an example because their city is ripping itself apart right now over single-family homes being turned into multifamily to support transit. We don't have that problem because we have a valley. But I'm not convinced that the majority of this community, there was a point where we did a computer simulation that showed how we would have the business and residential hit our numbers, and showed 4 to 6 story buildings all the way across the valley. I don't believe our community is in agreement on that, and that's underneath this whole thing, right? And what do we do about that? You're right. On some level, you say what your values are. I've said workforce housing, living wage jobs for 10 years, and I'm still here. But that problem, that challenge in front of us, I don't think that the moratorium. I think the moratorium helped, but it didn't eliminate the fact that entire direction we don't feel like we have buy-in at a community level. And so the extent to which this goal can be around trying to get some buy-in at a community level about what do we really want the valley to look like, and if we can't hit the numbers that the region, that the Growth Management Act says we have to take, then we have to have some hard conversations with people like Dow Constantine, right? And that's a whole entirely different pile of bricks, right? But to me, that's the real underlying question is, as a community, I think we have said that we have a certain set of policies, and it's about growing the valley floor. And I totally agree, the hillsides, I'm all for codifying that, because I think that that's an essential part of what we are as a city, but the valley is just totally not resolved.
Thank you, awesome, for talking about that, and I would wholeheartedly agree. And I think at an even more specific level, when we talk about if we can't hit the numbers that are in that plan, we're not going to have any trouble hitting the housing numbers. It's the jobs numbers. So we're out of balance. We're seriously out of balance. I will say we have no idea how we're going to get the housing, the jobs. And if we don't, then we have not, we're not compliant with our own plan. So yes, I would agree that that's one of those. That's one that could be in here as a specific action that we could talk about.
And I think I heard you say that as well, right? No.
I was going to say something about it.
Okay.
I'm still sitting on that. But I think there's a time and a place for that conversation still ahead. Because I think we're still trying, this.
This was the toughest one.
Elevator speech is a tough thing because everybody has their own 20 seconds that they feel is important. So Emily, I think you started to get, my sense you started to get close to something because I'm trying to see back past the big blocks that I see. And I'm kind of wondering what's really, what big blocks am I missing? I think Stacy gave an example. I don't share the same belief that some of the things that Tola said explicitly, I don't think the cities were all in agreement on this vision. I think he painted a picture that actually isn't quite right anyway. So, and I don't want to go too far into that, just looking at the agenda. But I think you said something which I think was interesting to me, which is in terms of growth and development, our strategy needs to it could be to uncover and find a new, if there's a new alignment that we have to have with our citizens. I think you did something about discovery. That our strategy, we need to find out more what needs to be the next step. We need to find out what might be missing. Stacy said it's not in the data, for example. There's a few voices haven't spoke up. So I don't know if you were suggesting that rather than something real specific, like I said, we're not trying to name another big block that might be missing, but it might be more. The strategy could be more of a formulation strategy than something specific that we're shooting for in terms of planning and growth management. That makes sense? I don't know if I was close to what you were trying to say.
No, I think that's pretty well in sync. I'm saying if there's some ambiguity about either what people understand, what the ultimate vision is, how we're going to get there, that it may be helpful for us to assess what those questions are and assess how we're going to get to those desired outcomes. And then we you might need to do that work first. I think that's a question that maybe is floating here. Is that what we think we need to be focused on next? I will also say that I've felt in this conversation and outside of this conversation, and even in our staff deliberations, I have felt that then poses a second question of, will that be enough? Is that all that this strategic plan needs to say about growth and development? And I think there's a way to say more by attaching some more specific action items that we think we already have enough data on to be able to go out and say, this is a thing we're going to do.
So, curiosity, notwithstanding whatever resources the city has to do stuff, would it be fair to say that the three of you have some consensus on that you wish that you had more, the city was doing more of understanding what's going on, clarifying vision about what we're trying to do, and active management of growth and development? And I'm kind of hearing kind of all of you talking about all three of those things. And maybe sort of in here is where you sense that the community isn't like necessarily all in agreement, so it's a little hard for you all to go too far out there and say what that is, but that's, I mean, there's a lot of work implied in that.
So that has potential. What's the purpose of your arrow?
Just showing that we're going to do, we need more of all that, that the amount of information, vision, and management that we currently have is not as much as you wish it was, that you're trying to up the effort there.
Okay, all right, now I see what you mean by that. Okay.
And if that's not right, I was trying to capture what I was hearing, because I heard Emily kind of said it back to you, you know, you wish you had more analysis and more sort of what was happening. I heard a lot of discussion about you wish we were sort of being a little more clear about, and I heard sort of hints at it, maybe the hillsides, protecting the hillsides and figuring out what the valley means. I heard sort of that. And then I heard that we should be doing more about it than we are currently doing. That was what I was trying to say back to you, what I was hearing.
So, yeah, so for me, I wasn't trying to suggest that we didn't have any data that supports the analysis that you did. I was saying that you provided your analysis based on data that was collected from the community members. We just don't have that with us today. So I'm wondering what the comments were specifically about controlling growth, and does that give us some insight on what we might be able to do? I do not think that we need to go out and spend another 2, 3, 5 years gathering information about what we need to do to better control growth based on what the community thinks. I think part of that is based on what the community expects us to do and be responsive to growth pressures. But I also think that we have enough feedback from our community over the last many years for us to pivot in some ways and do some things that are differently, including what Tola suggested, which is re-looking at, in particular, the Central Issaquah.
So let me rephrase what I said, because I think what you heard and what I intended to say were a little different. When I said information, I was thinking about information about exactly what is happening in the community, sort of hard data about how growth and development are happening. It wasn't about what does the community want or think. Now, maybe I had that, and I was trying to pair it back when Emily said more evaluation and assessment. I was trying to sort of put that up there. Maybe I should have said evaluation and assessment. I think we have plenty of information from this strategic planning process, and probably from everything you did over the last 5 years, that the community is uptight about growth and development. We know that, and we know that they won't be all on the same page about what to do about it. I think that's pretty clear.
Okay.
So I heard this as sort of evaluation and assessment of what was happening. Like as a council, you feel like you're operating on less information than you wish you had. That we need better clarity on vision, and we need to step up management. And again, there's a lot of work implied in that, so I don't know that the city has the resources to do that work. That's a kind of a separate question, but I was trying to get clarity on what.
Yeah, I would agree. I would generally agree.
You got to talk.
Well, there's been so many initiatives. Let's just say, like the Gilman corridor. or something. And I don't know how many souls got involved with that. The pictures didn't show a ton of people, but there's. That was a recent exercise. It was very narrow and specific in what it was trying to do. And you can look at various projects that we've done, kind of the conceptual plan that we've done for Newport between 54th and 900 is another one, for example. And maybe those are the most robust ones that we have. But when we've done those, I mean, we get a lot of information. It's almost, I don't feel like at a project level, information is what we're missing. So I thank you for phrasing it that way, and now that you said it that way, that that isn't how I feel.
Okay, so
thank you for saying that.
Can you restate it in a different way so I understand it better?
Well, again, this is my perspective. Stacy's maybe said it best already is, and let me see, I'm probably going to screw it up, but
It's okay, I won't remember what I said anyway.
What?
I'll have to go look at the tape.
yeah. But it's kind of like we're at a place, we know that there is tension within the community. But there are not, pitchforks and torches outside the door, that's for sure. There's desires, and then there's acceptance, there's certain reality, and people wish it would be better, and pressure comes when you grow. But that is not transformed into me on anything broad brush that, oh my gosh, we got to do something different. I think we can acknowledge that exists, and I think what really would drive me is that we have some pretty significant controls in place, and let's make damn sure we execute on those very well, and keep it transparent, and keep it alive, and make sure that people do know what we're doing and why we're doing. And in the course of following this roadmap that we already have in many areas, let's constantly assess and measure and get feedback. But I feel like we've got so much in place. Let's make sure we do it very good and keep our eyes and ears to the ground. And there's going to be stress and tension. There is. But we're not shutting down I-90. We're not building a wall.
We're not building a bypass.
Although there's
Also.
a growing talk about that.
Well,
No.
so I want to. This was the first sentence of. I actually want to say a little bit more about that. There's hard choices. I worry that there are not. I'll say the obvious. There are no easy solutions for where we're at as a community. The three of us all came on council. When you step back, basically just after the bypass conversation, right? Where we as a community said we didn't want to have a bypass. There are plans out there. There are county folks that have plans somewhere that has another ring of freeway running north-south through this general area, which is one of the, if you dig under the surface, one of the reasons why the bypass failed is that people were concerned that would eventually become part of a freeway system, and we would have, instead of having one freeway running east-west through town, we would have a north-south. If we built, I don't want to build a north-south freeway through the city of Issaquah. If we built one, you could do a lot with traffic, right? But absolutely positively, this community doesn't want an I-205 running north-south through the city, right? So this is part of this, like, how do we get to solutions? People complain about traffic. They would complain 100 times more if we suggested an I-205, that ran from Hobart to Redmond, to the Highlands or something. So I don't know what to do about it, right? I tend to think that the traffic. I just don't know how we're ever going to address this issue that I think people complain about growth. If we didn't have the traffic that we have, people would not complain about growth near so much. But I don't see any solutions to the traffic that don't involve something worse. So I'm really stymied about what to do about it.
Let me ask this question. Is it enough in this strategic plan to acknowledge, I forget how you said it, the angst, the tension?
That's kind of what I was. That's what I was wondering is if are we trying to, another shot at this is really making the point that growth and development is important. It's a big deal in Issaquah. Issaquah is uptight about it. There's tension and angst about it. And that, in fact, you have plans that are not crazy out of whack, and you've got smart people working on these things, but we need to emphasize that they need to do that stuff and really be at the top of their game, because this is the big deal in Issaquah.
I think you're hearing that as one perspective. I think the other perspective you're hearing is we are not doing all that we could do, or we're not doing all of the things we already have on the plans well.
Okay.
That's the rub here.
So there are blocks missing. When you said, so you think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but and your sources of information, I'm not sure what they are.
I'm
but
just
there
trying
are-
to facilitate. This is not
No, but
Emily's.
were
Just to
you
be clear.
bringing any new information to
No,
the
I'm
conversation?
not. No, I'm not.
Okay. And so, Stacy, I was thinking about something Stacy said. Then, how can you build that on top of what we already have? You
Build
said
what?
you said it earlier this evening. It is a general comment, a comment that you hear.
Residential growth on
How
top
can
of
you
the
do
traffic
this?
policy.
You already got this
Yeah,
going
it
on. How
was-
can you do that too?
Yeah,
I'm exaggerating. a
No,
little bit,
I
right?
hear, yeah, it's how can you,
Right.
well, you start giving people technical answers and acting like you're the smartest person in the living room and saying things like, well, we don't control the traffic that comes up Issaquah Hobart Road or SR 900, and, we do our, traffic analyses based on these intersections, and so they can build. And people are like, la, 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 la. You're building a huge apartment complex on top of traffic. I don't care where it comes from.
Right. So right.
That's what
right.
that's what I said.
That's okay. Good. So and that's it. And if strategically we felt, my gosh, we need a strategy to deal with that reality. I mean, what would that look like? What would that look like? What would,
Well, I don't
what
know.
kind of strategy? What goals would you have? I mean, the goal would be zero. No more anything. Is that it?
I don't know. I don't know that the conversation is supposed to be about how we're going to solve issues today. I think that I'm going to kind of shift it a little bit and say that, going back to Emily's comment about if we had something in the strategic plan that said we're going to look at a strategy for better managing or something like that. I don't know what you said. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing and we're going to do it better? Or I don't remember what you said. So, and you said, is that good enough if we recognize in the plan that we know that there's this tension? And I immediately said no. Because I couldn't tell anybody in the community, we heard you and we're going to keep on doing what we're doing and we're going to do it better. People would go, yeah. And
What
you're not
do you
going
want to tell them?
I want to say we are doing the things that you asked us to do, that you have asked us to do. Where my problem is that there's nothing in this plan that reflects what it is. I can't tell what people said that they want us to do. So I think what we have to do, it needs to be action oriented. We can't just plan. I think we need to show people at the end of 5 years, that we have done something measurable to better manage / control growth. That's what they asked us to do. We told them we're coming up with a 5-year plan. Nobody wants to hear me say, we heard ya.
That's great. And so then my question was, can we get specific about those actions we want to test with the full council and say, are these the things that we want to do?
Yeah. And so my answer to that is yes. I think we've given a couple of examples. Tola talked about the Central Issaquah Plan vision and whether we need to revisit if we're able to make those numbers and whether the community still has buy-in. I talked to one example about the hillsides and rezoning, and I think we have information that we, as Paul alluded to, we all have gathered over the years in the course of our political and city staff lives to figure out what some of those real action items might be to help address what people are telling us to do, which is better control growth. And looking at going back to the community workshops on the strategic plan and find out, we just didn't hear control growth control. We heard there was commentary about that. What's that commentary? What are they saying? That will give us insight, more insight.
appreciate that clarity. There's an element to that line that I struggle with, and that is if I take this story about Newport Way and all that's happening there, and if people, how are you doing this? How are you adding this on top of what's already there, right? It's effectively saying, don't do that at all. And so, if the answer would be at the end of 5 years that, well, we made sure all these things didn't happen. We stopped this, we stopped that, we stopped another thing. We did not pile things on top. I mean, that would be one potential answer. What are other potential answers? Roughly in the roughest form, might they look like? But if I take kind of literally what you said, one of the right answers, it could be acceptable, is, well, we stopped these things. That was going to come up, we stopped it. They want to do that, we didn't let it happen. I mean, that could be our strategy. That would be giving answers 5 years from now on saying that we did things that you wanted us to do.
That would be clarity. I know communities that has been their strategy. I haven't gotten the sense that that's what this council is saying is the strategy.
Yeah, and I don't think it should be the strategy, but that to me is the natural kind of conclusion. What I'm hearing when I hear you say that's what. Okay, well, and maybe that was just an example, and maybe I'm taking it too literally, but that's what I heard.
So, what I heard you say was kind of like these are my words, but it feels like a mashup to me. And the reason it does is because, let me give you an example of what I think it's, and what are we going to do? We're just going to stop if people don't like all the growth on top of all the traffic. I don't know that that's what people are saying. I mean, I think there are some people who are saying, who have the belief that you should just stop. And I think we know we can't just shut the barn door for the most part. So I don't know what the exact same circumstances would be with growth and development. But traffic, we have regional traffic problems that we're not going to be able to deal with on our own. I think everybody understands that. I think everybody in our community understands that, truly. But we did do a small project that I hear about all the time that people really, really, really like, and it cost us almost nothing in the grand scheme of things, and that's the traffic circle over at Trader Joe's. And so, to me, an analogous situation would be, as an example, if I could say to people, I know you don't like all the growth on top of traffic, but it's also a community value that we preserve our green spaces, and so we change the zoning so that you're not going to see that in any more of the green areas. So you make little changes, potential little, I guess, maybe that's a relative word. You make changes where you can, and I think that's what people want us to do. I also think that they expect us to, if we haven't, just like Tola brought up, if we have, we're constantly reassessing the Central Issaquah Plan, and if it looks like, the plan is in trouble for failure to make numbers, then I think we have a responsibility to look at that and see what we need to do to change those plans. So I don't agree that I don't hear people saying stop everything. I hear people say be more responsible. I'm not saying I agree with all of those comments. I'm just saying that's what I hear from people.
Okay, thanks for the clarity, because I was just carrying that one example to so that we could have this conversation. I do want to make one clarifying point as well, and I've had the advantage of being on the Regional Growth Policy Board, and making your job and popular. There is no authoritative source. There's no opportunity to fail. There's no you're going to get a grade card, you didn't make it, therefore here's your consequences. That doesn't exist. Those mechanisms don't exist. What's important is that you show that you can plan, you've got the capacity for this or that, the other thing, you've got it, you have policies that are in place to help achieve that. There's a lot of factors outside of your control, such as what's going on in the market. But if you don't make target population or target job that we get from the state and then through the county, and then we get them in our comprehensive plan. There's no controlling authority that says you fail, here's your consequences.
And I don't think that's the issue. I don't think the issue is the public.
No, I've
Okay.
heard that comment around our council a couple times. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, but I just want to make it clear, because we're being recorded, I want people to know that
Yeah.
I don't think that's not what the community's talking about.
And I didn't mean to. I'm just saying I'm correcting the
I
comment
understand.
there.
I'm correct. I just want to clarify for folks who are watching that what I hear, I don't hear that from. I don't think they care at all about whether we qualify for the Regional Growth Center under PRC standards. I think what they care about is that, and I think what's important is that we have a central Issaquah plan that has numbers in it, and that has those numbers in it as a standard for whether we are successful under that planning. That's what matters to me.
So it's, actually, I think there's a little more clarity in kind of the last few minutes of, we clearly got to say that growth and development are important. That's clearly, yeah, I'm hearing a very strong sense of that. And then we could do a better job of being clear and overt about evaluating progress on the plans that we do have. Everybody cited the central Issaquah plan, and how are you doing on those measures? And then strategize how we can do better in response to what's happening. Does that seem like a reasonable, just kind of, I'm not trying to rewrite the goal, I'm just basically trying to understand kind of what council means by this goal. Does that seem reasonable?
Well, I'd like to come back to my statement that I'm concerned that the community doesn't support the vision that we have in the Central Issaquah Plan. Let me go back even further. So the feds in their finding on the bypass said this city had 3 election races where the bypass was the critical issue in the race, and in all 3 cases the anti-bypass candidate won. So they believed that it had been a barometer of the community's attitude towards a bypass. I think we might have to, on issues like the bypass, on issues like potentially expanding Newport Way all the way through the city, big things that would actually impact how regional, the statement was made that we can't affect how regional traffic is on the city. I think that the levers that we have had available to us for the last 5 years don't work. I think there may come a point where we have to retake the temperature of the community. It may well be that the community would feel, and you can't build the bypass the way that it was built, but something fundamental that would address traffic. There may come a time that we need to take the community's temperature that way. And because we haven't had in the last 10 years any elections where such a mechanism formed the core of the election issue, I almost, at the risk of sounding like the guy who did the Brexit vote in England, there's a point where you may have to go back to the community and find out once and for all, let me use one because it hasn't been charged recently. If somebody came forward and said, we want to turn Newport into a high capacity from all the way through town, from the south end of town all the way to the 900, all the way to exit 15. Right, and it's going to fundamentally change the character of that entire part of town, but it would address the traffic on Issaquah Hobart Road. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm certainly saying that we sort of perceive that people don't want to do that because they didn't want to do the bypass. I just wondered the extent to which in the last decade people's attitudes have changed about some of these potential significant changes, because I worry, I love that we put the roundabout in front of Target, but 100 of those, we could do 100 of those and it wouldn't address the Issaquah Hobart traffic.
So I guess what I heard there was, this may be okay, but maybe we need to be more continuous and proactive about engaging the community and how we're.
Well, it comes back to my concern that what the community, whether we understand what the community wants as we grow, right? And the bypass / Newport Way expansion is an example of something that I don't think we know. If you put that in front of the voters, right, I don't think we know what they would say. And because we haven't had any elections that would clarify it in a decade, the way we did with Rittenhouse and Traeger and Scheer 12 years ago, I think we're operating in a little bit of a vacuum on. Well, my point is that there's some big game-changing options that I think we're keeping off the table right now based on very old data.
How does that I don't, so it seems like a mobility talk. So how does, so I'll start off by saying, I don't know if I agree with the reason that we would put big things on the table, but I am a huge believer in thinking out of the box and thinking creatively, and even if 99 out of the 100 things that you propose, not you, that are proposed do not work, doing the same thing over and over and over again that doesn't work is just insane. I guess that's the definition, right, of insanity. But, so I totally agree with you on thinking out of the box, and but I'm not quite sure how that relates to the topic here about growth and development. And
Because I think when the community...
What you don't say in there, and what I heard him just say was, there needs to be very purposeful additional exploration of options. So just to evaluate our progress and to do more. But I heard that if I could kind of take the specifics out and categorize it, it is we need to explore other options. Now that wasn't mobility, but that's very much tied. The roadway is tied very much to growth and the impacts of growth. But that's what I think I hear you're saying. Is we're not exploring tough questions.
Sure. I think specific to the question you just asked me, I think that the part of responding to growth, part of managing growth is how do you couple infrastructure to the growth itself, right? And do we have the ability? Are we seeing growth that cries out for infrastructure to support it that we leave off the table? So I think that's part of the conversation about growth, right, is the balance between growth and the infrastructure to support it. And when you say the public says we're not controlling growth, I wonder if some of what they're saying is you're having growth without the corresponding infrastructure to support it.
great, thanks.
So I kind of want to move us on to talk a little more about specifics. I added to this explore options and engage the community as seem to be things that are talking here. I'm not proposing this as an alternative goal statement. I'm just trying to sort of capture a sense of what we were hearing about this. That took about twice as long as we were thinking. The other really important thing that we want to make sure we do in the 44 minutes we have left is talk about the objectives and talk about the priority of the objectives. And I think the staff is ready to give you a little presentation on what they were thinking about the objectives and the actions. And then we want to ask you to discuss that a little bit, and then I'm going to try and get you to do a little prioritization exercise about those objectives. Does that seem acceptable thing to do for the next half hour or so?
Sure.
Let me ask that question. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we don't end up in a place where you're happier with, the product that is going to be reported out from this group.
Well, while he was talking, I was thinking, okay, I'd like to see the presentation, and I will use that framework as well as part of my assessment.
So
that's what I was thinking.
So
not just what as it's already written.
Okay, and I saw a couple other heads nod, I think. So let me suggest that we move in a speedy fashion, sort of through what has been created and why, and the connectivity between the pieces, and then we make sure we have enough time to say, are there things here that are still in sync with the discussion that just happened, and therefore we want to retain, or are there things that are missing, and can we do some work to try to create those pieces? Sound good? All right.
And duck out for 60 seconds.
Trish, Stephen,
Okay.
Ron.
Oh,
he's for the next one. Sorry.
Steve.
It's like, count me out.
So this is objective 1. Do you want to do it? And I can chime in, or however I do it.
I'll start with an
Okay.
overview. So I'll try to be speedy. So our goal really captured three main elements that we wanted to reflect in the objectives. So the first is, proactively managing and planning growth. The second is communicating with, in terms of how we're managing and planning our growth. And the third objective relates to a strong sense of community and livability. And for each of these three objectives, we've come up with some action items. So with the first objective, that's to help neighborhoods retain their charm and have a distinctive character pattern setting that includes both built and natural environments. And so part of that is creating standards to help retain, to identify and create standards that would help retain and protect these essential neighborhood characteristics. What we want to do is going to be driven from the community. We want to hear from the community in terms of what they want and have them drive some of the improvements through a neighborhood matching grant program. And then also on a more city-driven initiative to implement CIP engagement strategies with the neighborhood. The second objective is really to engage and communicate how we're planning and managing our growth. And that includes a comprehensive neighborhood-based strategy to engage the community members, inform them of what our plans are, get their feedback, and also make sure they're on board with the current development activities. Some of the strategies that we have now kind of dovetail with this. We're doing a little more outreach with construction activities with the neighborhoods. And I think we have some plans in the works to try to connect more of the improve our communication with the community on what the city is doing on city projects and city improvements. And then we saw a disconnect between the policy making and the implementation piece. And so one example is, where the PPC is working on the vision of a policy, the Development Commission is working on actual current development implementation of that policy. We want to try to bring those two pieces closer together so that there's a connection between them. And then finally, the third objective is trying to make sure that there's public amenities, a variety of housing types and services that would contribute to a livable community. And this is one where we're going to need some additional clarification and input from council members in terms of helping us focus and define what livability means. Part of what we've heard from the community is making sure that there are amenities and services in communities where growth is occurring. Making sure that those are in place, identifying any gaps in livability, and then also we're looking at completing a housing inventory, so that would help us better understand the numbers and types of housing we have.
So I'll start with a question, and then I have a comment about and then I have initially a comment on number 3. So for all of these actions, and the objectives and the actions, so how specifically did you come up with them? Is it based on what our whole not our whole conversation? Several of my comments have been about what the community told us beyond just control growth. And so I want to know how we came up with these objectives, or just actually mostly the actions. What are they based on?
For the first one, the neighborhood-based planning, we've heard not only from the folks that talked about that their neighborhoods were all of a sudden being stripped of their charm, their quality of life, because the new folks are coming in, the new traffic, the new folks are at their parks, they're using the schools and all that.
Okay.
And so we started with the neighborhood and thought, some of the neighborhoods are already well taken care of with the architectural design standards, for example, that you all just adopted from the moratorium.
Yeah.
Old Town, we're just about to start that this year to help them. We had the whole outreach with the Old Town plan that they want, lower heights, they want less density there. So we thought if we continued that with other neighborhoods to find out, are there other neighborhoods that are vulnerable, maybe with the land uses, maybe with the standards, that if we methodically go through and try to help them in a regulatory fashion, that would help them feel like their charm or their character is going to be retained in that sense. And then the last one was the amenities is some folks, you think of Old Town in the grocery store. That's an amenity that we keep hearing that they're missing, and so we're really keen on trying to figure out how we can help with that, even though we know we don't control the market, no pun intended. But we were trying to go after the comments that were made and trying to attack them or address them at a smaller level versus a citywide level, other than the communication of what we're trying to do and what they would like us to do. We'd like to do that more at a neighborhood level too, so we can be more responsive to them at a neighborhood level. And whether it's giving them grant money to do things that they themselves want to do they want a monument sign, do they want a play area, do they want to do neighborhood watch the night out, how do they want to make their neighborhood stronger as a neighborhood. So we tried to throw in a lot of pieces at a smaller grained level that we thought would make a difference.
Thanks. I changed my mind on my comment.
Oh dear. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, it isn't either.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, we're just trying to synthesize both what came in during the outreach on strategic plan and as we hear other input on these topics as we bring items forward for PPC consideration, DC consideration, etc.
So I want to mention again the idea that I had said at the leadership group around an effectivity matrix, right? You take what we heard at the charrette, right? And you show, basically you've got however many action items we have. That's one side of your matrix. The other side of the matrix is comments from the charrette, and you show which comments from the charrette influence the development of which action item. And then it becomes really, really clear what the basically enabling or empowering
I
construct
don't
is.
think we have that level of specificity in comments. We get comments that are big and broad, and now we have to interpret what it is somebody wants us to do.
Okay.
So
Well, I
it's,
wish
it's
we
tough.
would.
I think we have tried to demonstrate that in previous presentation at the objective level, but it's a totally different ballgame at action level.
Okay, well, I feel like when I hear this question from other council members, it makes me feel stronger of my opinion that we should have an effectivity matrix. Whether you want to tie that effectivity matrix to objectives or action items, either way, I think showing the traceability.
Do we still have that presentation that shows the connections? Can we?
That's not what I'm asking for, right? I'm asking for an effectivity matrix.
I understand that. I'm trying to see if we have the ability to still produce that same outcome of demonstrating some links for you now, so that maybe we can keep the conversation going by saying,
I don't
okay,
need
here's where it tied in.
Yeah, I don't need to see it this evening, but I'm suggesting that when we come back together out of the 6 subgroups, it would be nice to be able to show that the objectives and or the action items that we have flow from traceability straight back to the charrette, because I think that's a powerful
And I'm making
part.
a different point too, that it's not just to the charrette. We have taken information. Remember, we did pop-ups all over the community, so that data. We can provide a bunch of links, but I don't want to make the leap that everything has to tie back to charrette, because we got data in a multitude of ways to influence this.
And then my other question is around the neighborhoods piece. So I realize we've moved some people around in terms of communications and whatnot, but some of this seems to me like things that should be in Leeson's bailiwick anyhow,
Yeah.
as part of the sort of the original plan for coming up with neighborhood engagement.
Yep, they are. Like C, I can tell you, is a plan. activity.
Okay.
It's part of her job. It's a piece she has already begun doing. Yeah.
So I think we kind of jumped to the action steps. And did we on the agenda?
What we were thinking we were going to do was I was
just responding to your comments around neighborhoods.
What we were thinking we were going to do was I was going to show you 2 or 3 slides of what we usually use in our consulting work about sort of how you structure objectives and actions, and then have you discuss what the staff work done and prioritize the objectives. That was what we thought we were going to do. And I'm willing to do that or do something else if you want to in light of your earlier discussion and your thoughts.
I have a comment, and I may have more that development on this. So I actually like objective number 1 quite a bit. And I like how I brought it down to the kind of the lived experience of our citizens in the neighborhoods where they choose to live. My whole frame of mind in the earlier conversation on what's the goal of this goal, what's the council intent, I really wasn't in that space. But I know, I believe many people, a big part of their sense about are we doing things right in terms of managing growth is the experience and what they have in their neighborhood. And is that where they want their to be as an individual, as families, and getting a better idea of what those are on a neighborhood basis, I think is a really good thing. We have done that in certain areas, but we haven't done it in other areas. And I do see that as a really good idea for this overall strategic plan of making sure that we're managing growth correctly. Because there's big blocks, and then there are real blocks. I've been talking about the big blocks, which are these big plans. But and I live in a neighborhood, and there really has never been any type of community conversation there about a common understanding of this is what we have, and this is what we want, and what do we think the threats are, and boy, if the city could help us, what might that be? That conversation hasn't happened everywhere. So so when you presented it, I have a very strong positive reaction to that objective.
I think that objectives need to be determined based on specific criteria, and not what I necessarily personally think about them. And that's not a response to you. That was going to be my comment anyway. I know in the materials here we have something about how does council feel about something. I think that's not the correct way to approach an exercise like this. So I like the idea that we have objectives that we can use, guidelines for filtering.
Okay, I heard that. I'm ready to go there.
Yeah, let's have that conversation, because I think we need help with that, establishing that criteria. That's what the elevator speech was to help us to do, because honestly, we need you guys to tell us what you want in this plan,
So
because you're not on the same page.
Let me take 2 minutes and walk through these slides that we often use to try and shape. When we think about what are guidelines for good objectives, we think a good objective specifies the outcomes you seek to create and for whom. That is, they're really specific. They link in a compelling way to your goals, mission, and vision, so they're strategic about what you're trying to achieve. They afford sufficient control over outcomes to enable real accountability. That is, you're setting objectives about something you actually can have some influence on. So they're realistic and achievable, given your capabilities within a limited time frame. That they're measurable on an accurate and timely basis, and they enable you to make some strategic trade-offs related to program focus and resource allocations in the future. Often a little strategic planning gimmick is that there are SMART objectives, which are strategic, measurable, realistic, achievable, and time limited. And so all those pieces in there come together. And then we think the action statements represent a critical step toward achieving the objectives. They're specific about what will be occurring, realistic and achievable, given with your capabilities in a time frame, that they're measurable, and that they're understandable to a general audience. We also think at the level of a strategic plan, there aren't too many actions, because everything changes all the time. And so they should be pretty high-level action, and at the council level especially, you should mostly be thinking at the level of the goals and the objectives you're trying to accomplish, and then let the professional staff figure out day to day what you're doing, and you want to be measuring, are they getting there in the big picture? Something to keep in mind is that they need to undertake in the current context to make progress toward the objectives, and then you will update these on an annual cycle, because you can't see too far into the future. They're not going to cover everything the city's working on, and they can't predict future outcomes. They often require significant interdepartmental coordination, and usually if they're at the strategic plan level, they probably should. And they need to be financially and politically feasible. So that's our general guidelines, and then we just had a summary of those objectives and actions. And then moving to criteria, we discussed this at the last council work session, and it seemed to us that there were four criteria you might do in prioritizing objectives. What level of impact does it have on the intent of the goal? That's why we wanted to start with understanding the intent of the goal. How well does the objective align with the intentions we described in the elevator speech? How well does it align with the intention? How much control do we have over the intended outcome? All of you made comments about there's things happening here you don't have much control over. And what's our likelihood of success? In the idea that a perfect objective, you'd have some ability to impact it, it aligned with your intention, you have some control over the outcome, and you have a reasonable shot at success. That would be something you'd want to really wade into. Did that all make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I would then suggest that it might be a useful exercise if we took the three objectives that were here and ran it through a little prioritization based on those criteria. Now, I know there was some question, do we have clarity on the third objective? I know the staff had some concern that the third objective was a little hard to pin down. David, you want to expand on that?
Well, I think Gene had mentioned that. I guess more globally, I think we're wondering if we have all the right objectives on the table. So I think we need to resolve or try to chase that down a little bit before we prioritize them. I would suggest.
All right. So I heard that there are three objectives. One is retaining neighborhood charm. One is that the community shapes plans. And the third one is that we have a bundle of things that add up to livable. And David, you're saying, does the council think there are more objectives or different objectives? Is that right?
Yes.
Orders where we can't have more.
Right. I'm questioning the community shapes plans number 2, because I think that should be just sort of inherently part of our process when we come up with plans.
You're saying that this community should shape everything, so it doesn't really need to be a growth and development objective.
Well, kind of, and I thought, to Tola's point, for number 2A, I thought that was part of what we were trying to accomplish with our neighborhood coordinator anyway. So I don't know that we have to, we've got a lot to get through in 25 minutes, so maybe you're just wanting feedback for now, or I don't think we're going to agree on everything here in 25 minutes. So
So what we thought we were going to do was take these 3 objectives and prioritize them. That's what I thought the intent for this part of the meeting.
How about if we ask if these are the right 3 objectives?
Okay.
Okay. Council President Martz, do you think these are the 3 right objectives?
I have concern that embedded, I mean, these objectives are where we want to invest, where we want to do things differently going forward as a result of this ongoing effort. And I think buried in here is a bunch of neighborhood work that was already signed up for. So I don't like. In both Objective 1 and Objective 2, I would probably get rid of Objective 1 and figure out if there's things in Objective 1 that are important, of how to put them in an objective that makes more sense.
Like what? What would make more
Create
sense?
neighborhood standards to retain and protect essential neighborhood characteristics. Implement a neighborhood matching grant program to foster small-scale neighborhood-driven enhancements in community building. Implement a neighborhood-level CIP engagement strategy. I mean, we years ago had a goal about going out to the neighborhoods and understanding priorities and incorporating that into how we do business as a city, and that's what those sound like to me. And we haven't. The person that we hired to do that has wound up working on some other stuff as well, so we haven't made the progress on that I thought we would. But that doesn't seem new to me necessarily. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I really like Objective 1. There's been a lot of talk about wanting things that we've done, like with the central plan, to help us to preserve existing neighborhoods. But this objective carries us to that next step, where we're more comprehensive and deliberate about making sure we understand what it is about the neighborhoods that people want to preserve. So we can go beyond just what we said. Goal is of preserving neighborhoods. We can be more proactive and in a planned way understand that for all of the areas of the city. I like objective number 1.
I think if I look at the guidelines for the objectives that we have, and I'm not sure we have all the right words, but to the extent that Objective 1 helps us retain the identity that the community talked about, I would, that general objective I would agree with. I would have to spend more time with it just to see how the right words are there for specifically making it through that filter that we have. The Objective 2, I do not agree with. And I don't think that links in a compelling way back to our goals, mission, and vision, and I think it should be just essential, inherent in the work that we do. The number 3, the goal of, I think, to me, the goal should be more clearly about just sort of the experience here. I'm not coming up with any right words. I think I understand what it's supposed to do, but I don't know that I agree with the words. I think the one that's missing is a goal about actually tackling the different issue of controlling growth and some of the things that we talked about earlier today. That's what I think is missing here. And I'm not trying to add because I already took away. And I think we probably have too many action steps here. I'm not kind of looking at it at that level yet. I'm trying to be disciplined about how I look at it.
So I'll state my concerns with Objective 1 a little bit differently than I said. I maybe got tripped over who's already doing what in the the city. I don't see how objective one gets us to the big issues that we spent the first hour talking about. I mean, maybe it's just my neighborhood. There hasn't been a new house built in my neighborhood in 30 years. There hasn't been a new piece of infrastructure other than water towers being fixed in 30 years. And so my neighborhood, nothing that will happen in my neighborhood will have any impact on anyone's perception of how the city handles growth. Not that there aren't issues that are important to my neighborhood. Public safety is an example of something that our neighborhood grapples with the increase in property crime. But if we say this is around growth and development, I don't see necessarily how objective one tracks to that.
It seemed to me that the way I understood objective one is we don't want to lose the character of Issaquah's existing neighborhoods in the face of growth and development. So in fact, success on this would be not very much change in your neighborhood. That would actually be, that's a win if nothing very much changes.
I just can't envision any amount of money that the city would spend on anything that anyone outside my neighborhood or even inside my neighborhood would think would have that they would spend on my neighborhood that would have anything to do with managing growth and development.
What
I can't
if
envision a
housing
project.
codes allowed, instead of single-family housing, something very different?
They don't.
Well, so the point would be don't change the zoning.
Okay, so that's an inaction. Okay, so we can.
No, it's not an inaction. It's an action that helps, that changes the status quo to get what a neighborhood wants.
I'm just saying for my neighborhood, that would involve saying, hey, everybody, good news, we didn't change the code to turn your home into multifamily housing.
So maybe your neighborhood is the one that's screaming about being overrun with the impacts of development. So maybe it's not targeted for your neighborhood. So I think what Tola is highlighting is one of the things that I was thinking about earlier is specifies the outcomes you seek to create and for whom. So when I looked at that, I said, yeah, I don't need anything in the Issaquah Highlands. I mean, we're kind of dense. We've got a lot of new stuff. So who are we targeting? Which neighborhoods are we targeting? So maybe that would help.
Go ahead. I think
So-
we've been calling them as vulnerable neighborhoods, but that came out because that was such a bad word. But I think it's those that don't have protections. Like, for example, if 3 of your neighbors decided to sell their 3 properties and someone came in and used the cluster provision to do triplexes or fourplexes or even just a set of duplexes, in my mind, that would change the character of Squack Mountain, and probably the neighborhood wouldn't be too happy with that. And so
Okay, so that's a good
those kinds of
counterexample.
things that we're looking at. That what would be the worst thing that could happen with the existing zoning code that we couldn't even imagine somebody would do? We're trying to figure that out. So we're proactively making it not happen. Then all of a sudden, having it happen and go, whoa, that was in the code, because as you said, nothing's really happened up there.
Yeah, someone putting duplexes or triplexes on Idlewood, that is a fine counterexample to my question, because yes, that would go over poorly in my neighborhood.
And those are the things we were thinking about. Are there other places in other neighborhoods that those things could happen? Because our code has been in place for so many, many years that we wouldn't have thought of that 20 years ago when we first were drafting IMC code provisions.
Okay, I feel better about this one.
So I'm hearing, I think I hear, if I take the whole conversation of the last hour and 45 minutes together, I hear some consensus around 2 objectives, one of which is protect existing character, make sure that we don't lose what we've got in the face of all this important growth and development. And the other one is be more proactive about managing growth, because growth and development is really important, which is probably a rearrangement of the third objective to be more sort of assertive about what we're going to do. We're going to be more proactive about managing growth and development. And then I'm hearing a little bit of, we don't really need this one about the community controlling growth because we want the community engaged in everything. Is that a fair way to characterize what I just heard?
Did you just state 2 of them then?
I was
Okay.
saying that if I took it all together, I would say there would be 2 objectives here instead of 3. The first one is pretty much what's there, which is about
Right.
don't lose what we've got. And the other one would be about being more proactive about managing growth and development, which at some level is a restatement of the third one. To be, it's about we are going to do more to manage growth and development because it's so important in our community.
If I may, so that are you suggesting, and is what's proposed by the third one, I think there was an example given, being more proactive to actually drive certain outcomes at community levels, at neighborhood levels? So, for example, nothing will work if you don't. The density, if we ever to get even the central area, if the most basic needs and amenities aren't in like walking distance to more people, it's not going to work. So the loss of the type of grocery that was available in the Old Town area is a loss to the neighborhood, perhaps. So I use that just as an example. Is that what you're suggesting, that this is a proactive attempt to identify and maybe help influence the creation, or whatever the right word is, of additional neighborhoods, amenities, very almost like neighborhood targeted? You know what? They really need this here. What can we do about that?
Clarify the amenities and then try to encourage.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay. And if that's what Brian just meant, then I get it. I like it. I want to make two other comments. I agree about number 2. It's like it's an objective that just permeates how we do community-based decision making. Yes, we're elected, we're elected representatives, but it permeates everything. So I don't, and so it describes how we do things as much as what our objectives are themselves, or it should. And then I think the first part of the conversation of this meeting was at a certain level that where it is kind of difficult. I appreciate the effort that's been put in to find words and capture and try to drive to consensus on all of this. If these objectives feel like they're happening at a different level, I'm just going to have to be okay with that, because I think in many ways they do meet those objectives and the kind of the criteria, what we're trying to do. And if we might be struggling at a certain higher level to say what we want out of growth and development is, and what the goal is, at the same time, there is we can come up with a set of objectives, and there is linkage. Then, and they may not address this stuff that we can't define real clearly. Then so be it.
So if I had to, if we called the bell on this meeting and I had to go out and get in the elevator and talk to a constituent about what just happened at this moment, I would say we clarified that the council's intent about growth and development is that really emphasize that growth and development are important in Issaquah, and they're top of mind issue, and we need to take them very seriously. And the city needs to evaluate our progress on our existing plans. We need to strategize how we can do more to achieve the goals in those plans. We need to explore options to do better at that, and we need to continuously engage the community in understanding how the community feels about growth and development. And to achieve that goal, we have 2 major objectives. One is that the city of Issaquah is going to take a more proactive role in managing growth, because we know it's a top priority issue in our community. And we're going to make sure that we don't lose the qualities of our existing neighborhoods that make this community so special to many of its citizens.
So I wasn't thinking that we would get rid of objective 3. I think it's a little bit different than retaining the neighborhood character and more proactive in controlling growth. I look at livable community. I'm thinking about objective 3 a little bit differently than it's worded, but my thought about objective 3 is we start implementing the plans that we said certain elements of plans that we said we were going to implement as growth was happening. We have, we have a lot of plans for parks and, sidewalk connections and trail connections and all sorts of stuff. And so I would think that number 3 would be about that. It's a little bit different. It's different than those 2. And just to finish up my thought, on the actions that would be under that, and none of them would say outreach, identify, or inventory, because at the end of 5 years, I don't think that I will feel, or anybody in the community would feel like we were successful with a strategic plan if we said we did some community outreach and we identified this, and I want stuff. I want things happening. I want some stuff on the ground. And we have tons of plans that say that we're going to do that. And so maybe number 3 is about dedicating financial resources towards implementing some of those smaller portions of the plans that will make a difference to people in the community.
And is that how you're differentiating between what might live here and what might live in core infrastructure? Because core infrastructure has some verbiage around go and fill in gaps in sidewalk networks, go and invest in the infrastructure that we need for growth.
Yeah, and
so you're thinking it's smaller scale?
Is it on a neighborhood level?
I think it's so I would have to go back and look. I think this is maybe we have an opportunity with I don't think I'm on that committee, to think about whether, and hopefully the committee will discuss it, just like we discussed today, about whether that core infrastructure is right for this strategic plan right now. Is that really a focus of our community for the next 5 years? And maybe the answer is not all of that. Maybe we get rid of a whole category, and maybe we take the important things out of there that fit under growth and mobility, and create fewer categories, less to do for 5 years, so that we can prove ourselves over the next 5 years. So I know that's a longer answer to your question.
It helped.
Okay.
It helped. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to push back on, I don't understand the difference between what you just said about the actions and everything and more proactive controlling and managing growth. That seemed like you just used different words to say the same point.
So fair enough. I think that in my estimation, based on what I hear from the community, I think there's a difference between you can proactively control growth, or you can, and you can also at the same time implement parts of your plan that you've said you're going to implement.
Seems like I think I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
I think we're trying to get the semantics straight. Seems like the objective is that we're going to do a better job of managing growth. And one of the things we are going to do that is do a better job of implementing the plans that we already have, just whatever is you just said.
Make it more livable for the people who are here and experiencing the growth. How are we going to make it?
But you just said that that's by doing the things that are in the plans we already have.
Right.
So that seems to me that's one of the ways you're going to be more proactive about managing growth, is you're going to step up and do better at
Sure,
the plans you already have.
and it could fit under that. I just didn't want to lose that specific piece that I kind of felt I don't like to use that word, that I don't know, that I thought maybe was trying to come through number 3.
We want the feel.
Well, I just try to get away from it when we're doing these kind of exercises.
I know,
as
but
much
it's
as
coming
possible.
from what you've heard. It's
Yeah.
coming from data. So
No,
it's
as I
appropriate.
read it,
yes.
I was
Yes.
interpreting that maybe
Yes.
that's what was trying to shine through, and I didn't want to lose that if we cut number 3.
That was helpful.
Okay. But that's just me.
Is everybody sort of okay with this, or tired enough that you don't want to fight about it anymore?
So can I just clarify something? So you said being more successful implementing our plans, but that's with the big caveat that there are some plans that we believe that we need to revisit.
Yep.
Or do you believe that there are some plans we need to revisit? Okay.
Well, when I mentioned revisiting.
And I just wanted to clarify.
But also the point there being, just because it's in the plan doesn't mean you've achieved the goal. You got to actually do what it says in the plan. I think that's what Stacy's saying.
Yes, there could be implementation to fill gaps in sidewalks, which would increase the amenities available to current residents.
Right.
But then through other measures, we could be more proactive about managing growth. So more amenities for current residents, thinking more proactively about growth.
The stuff we already promised.
I just want to highlight for Objective 2, the reason why that is there is that it was believed that there was a disconnect between the longer term plans that were out in place and what was currently seen on the street, and residents feel like they weren't fully understanding how the two were connected.
I don't think you can be in here, but
So that's where that came from. It may be worded as we should be doing things this way, but it was recognizing there's kind of this long-term, short-term disconnect.
Okay.
That's great.
Do we need to prioritize?
Well, we actually need to get to the next group, so I'm going to ask, when we initially talked about doing these small groups, we talked about the possibility of meeting 1 or 2 times. So I'm looking for council preferences on perhaps reconvening and capitalizing on this.
my suggestion would be an hour, because I feel like if you guys can synthesize what you've heard and put together a new straw man, we could spend 15 or 20 minutes on that straw man, and then do the remainder of the trying to apply criteria and prioritization.
Yep.
So it would be really great to also get to performance measures, because that was really going to highlight for us where those priorities live.
As the facilitator, if we're down to 2 objectives, I'm a lot less worried about trying to which order they're in. If there's 4 or 5, that becomes a much bigger deal. So,
You think an hour, Paul?
We can do it in an hour, and if that's what we all have to be on task. Yeah.
So we, staff, BDS, will work on straw man proposal, synthesize this information, try to represent it accurately, get that in front of you in advance of a meeting. We'll poll each of you to find out what works for availability.
And if 90 minutes makes more sense, because we want to make sure that we don't cut off an important conversation, I'm fine with that. It feels like it feels like 2 hours.
Strive.
Yeah, it feels like 2 hours. I hope it doesn't take us 2 hours to do the next part.
Okay, very good.
We should be able to build off what we've done.
thank you all. This was hard. Thank you for staying with it.
That was a really good conversation.
It was.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take like a 5 minute. Yeah. All right. Great. We'll wrap up.